think.
All right.
Yay.
And I'm going to stop sharing. Pass it over to Jackie.
I'm going to start sharing. There it is. Very good. And I'll bring you all back up. Excellent. Awesome. So you should see our logo. Amazing. Well done. So yes, I'm zooming in all the way from just in Owen Sound, which is like if you take Highway 6 straight up from the city, you'll end up in Owen Sound. You always do. All the cool roads end up in Grey Bruce. And I like to introduce myself with pictures. I always find that's the best way to do it. So I'm from a very small town. So Samantha, even smaller than Harrow. Briceville has a population of about 600, and I think I'm related to 3/4 of them. So I come from a really big family. I have a lot of cousins, a lot of aunt and uncles, and I've been working at CMHA Grey Bruce for 19 years. The majority of the time is spent in the schools. We talk a lot to the JKs all the way to grade 12, but we also do information sharing presentations like this. And when I'm not at work, I love to sing. I love karaoke, all that good stuff. And during the pandemic, when a lot of my singing gigs dried up, I would drive around with my karaoke equipment, and I would visit all my favorite people at some of the retirement homes and nursing homes. So the picture on the far right at the bottom is Gateway Haven in Wyerton, and that's me in the backyard. What you don't realize is it's March, and it's very cold there at that time, but we had a great time just singing together. So that's a little bit about me. We learned about health all the way from JK. You all did. We learned about the food groups. We learned, if I did a little poll here and asked who here had to take CPR first aid in their lifetime, probably the majority of you did. We know to go to the doctor if we have a fever, we're not feeling well. All these things we learn, but I find it so interesting that we didn't seem to learn about mental health all along that tangent at the same time. In fact, when I was in school, we didn't even hear the words mental health until grade 11 phys ed. And the thing about that is grade 11 phys ed was an optional course, so you didn't even have to take it. So you could have completed your whole school career and never once heard those two words together. So I always found that interesting. Is it because we don't experience mental health until we're past high school, or is it just that it was just never something we talked about? So I love that that's changing. School Mental Health Ontario and the Ministry of Education has been working hard to bring curriculum right into the classes. So that makes me happy. So we're going to do a little literacy today, if you missed those chances when you were in school. So when we think about mental health really is about the ability to enjoy your life. And isn't that what we always want for each other? There's two pieces in there that make it easier. The one piece is about our feeling of self-worth. Do we feel like we have something to contribute today? And ideally, is someone going to notice that? Because that always feels good. Hey, you did a great job letting everybody in on this Zoom meeting, and you did a great job introducing. It's always nice to hear those things. And then the other part of mental health is how able are we to handle bad stuff? Ooh, when we are on the roundabout of life, also known as Elvanley, if you're from Grey Bruce, and you go careening to Hepworth, but you totally meant to go to Chesley, how quickly do you get back on that roundabout and get going the direction you were headed? So those two pieces together make it easier to achieve and have and feel good mental health. But I actually like this definition by John Lennon. I don't know if there's any Beatles fans in the audience, but John remembers growing up and his mom saying, John, whatever you do when you get older, I just want you to be happy doing it. So he remembers being in school and the teacher said, hey, young Lennon, what would you like to be when you grow up? And I'm sure the teacher thought he'd say something like rock star or farmer or scientist or whatever. And so when young Lennon looked at the teacher and said, I want to be happy, the teacher looked back at young Lennon and said, I don't know if you understand the question. And young Lennon, who was cheeky even back then, looked back at the teacher and said, well, maybe you don't understand life oh, he was cheeky. And he is not incorrect, because it is so true. We deserve to be happy geographically where we live, who we cohabitate with, and doing what we do on a daily basis. So he was not wrong. So we have a lot of co-op students where we are, and we had a little poll the one day. We said, if you could think of someone in this world who has the perfect life, who would you pick? And 9 out of 10 co-op students picked Bradley Cooper. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his movies. And I said, well, why would you pick him? And they say, well, he has the 3 check marks, right? He has a lot of zeros in his bank account. He probably has a big house with a big garage with lots of toys in it. And, the attraction thing, right? Whoever he thinks is cute probably thinks he's cute back, right? And again, they're not incorrect. However, imagine, hypothetically, that Mr. Bradley Cooper falls down in the filming of whatever movie he's making right now. And imagine he hurts his arm. It's really amazing, because it happens to us all the time. People just come running. And they're like, oh, Bradley Cooper, can I get you an ice pack? Do you want me to call an ambulance? Can I get you a sandwich? Do you want a drink of water? Right? And Bradley Cooper is very happy for all this help. He's like, yes, please, on the ambulance. Yes, please, on the ice pack. And my favorite sandwich is a Western on rye. Right? And so he's very thankful for all that help. And then after he gets to the hospital, maybe he's got some follow-up stuff. He's got an x-ray and some physio. He's got some appointments with his doctor. So it's a while before he gets back to the movie. And in that time, nobody's upset about it or upset at him. They're like, oh, I hope he gets better soon. I hope he's feeling well. People are checking in on him. And after a certain amount of time, there he is, back to his Bradley Cooper self. It's awesome. But I've always, in this job, in the 19 years, found it so interesting that we treat our emotional injuries and our mental health injuries so different, that sometimes when we're in someone's space that's experiencing a mental health issue, we're so unsure. Do they want an ice pack? Do they want a sandwich? I don't know. And so sometimes we find ourselves leaning away in those situations. But also, for ourselves, if we're the ones experiencing that emotional injury, sometimes we're uncertain of what help to accept. We're not always necessarily quick to accept those helps that are offered. So I've always found that interesting. Why is that? Well, there's a word for that, and we call it stigma. So when I think about the different parts of our body, right? We're full of organs, and not the kind you play in church on Sunday. So we're full of organs, and one of our organs is the pancreas. And when it's not working the way it's supposed to, we have symptoms. Right? Maybe we're dizzy, maybe we're thirsty all the time, run into the bathroom a lot, and we may or may not receive a diagnosis of diabetes. And depending on the type of diabetes I have, I'll have different forms of treatment that have been offered. Maybe it's medication or a cool program that they have at the hospital I can be attending. There's no cure for diabetes, but I can live with it and manage it and still go on to do my day-to-day stuff. And there's not a whole lot of stigma around diabetes. But if I were now to flip the screen and talk about my brain, well, mental illness is the same. It has symptoms. I get a diagnosis. Maybe I'm diagnosed with depression or anxiety. There's a long list of them. And with each one comes treatment, which could be medication, could be a program in my community, could be meeting with my doctor. There's no cure for mental illness, but I can live with it, management, and still do my day-to-day stuff. And just like diabetes, anybody can be diagnosed with and live with a mental illness. So we put all that together, and I call this my mental health continuum. It's a triangle. And so in the bottom is where we find most of us. We're doing okay, right? If asked, we're like, hey, not doing too bad. I've been loving the webinars. I love connecting with people. I'm appreciative of my iPad where I get to see my grandkids, and I love seeing them in person now. It's been so much better that way. And then in the middle of the triangle is what we call situational. So we call that mental health problems. So things that tend to be temporary, that have been added to my life or taken away from my life that I don't like. I don't like how I'm feeling. I don't like being in there. Maybe I'm extra sad or stressed about something, but give me a little bit of time, a little bit of space, right amount of people, I can get back to the bottom of the triangle. And then the part at the top, 10 to 15% of us at any one time, we're experiencing the signs and symptoms of a mental illness, whether we get the diagnosis or not. So that's our triangle. But I don't know if you remember, I take you back to March 2020. And a random thing happened across the globe. And I don't know if you remember it. It's so long ago now. But things got a little bananas. And who knows, my Costco shopping husband made us a millionaire. I could have gone down to New York City and bought pizzas for the whole city because of all the toilet paper we keep on the top of our freezer. I don't know, again, if anybody else can relate. We were a millionaire, didn't even know it. And this is what happened to our triangle. And in all the 19 years I've been doing this, I've never seen a triangle like this. And this is kind of where we are. We're kind of balancing this space post-pandemic. So CMHA National did a survey across Canada during the pandemic and just asked, how are you doing? How are you managing? How are you feeling in this time? And a group of folks said, you know what? I'm doing okay. There's Heathers and Steves and Samantha's taking care of us, and we're doing all right. I got enough toilet paper. I'm doing okay. But there was a whole chunk of people that are now at the top of the triangle saying, I don't like this. This isn't my happy place. I've got feelings I haven't felt in a while, or maybe not ever. And so that's kind of where we are right now. We're kind of waiting for the triangle to shift back down. And we know there's certain groups of people that felt that pandemic pretty hard. And some of them included our kids. Because our kids, that time of our life is for getting outside and being in sports and falling down and getting back up again. And that was kind of hard to do during that time. Even our teenagers, if that time of life was for swiping right and swiping left and parties, and also tricky to do during that time. So when the survey asked and said, well, if you're on the top of the triangle, can we ask you, how are you coping? How are you managing during this time? And people were very honest. And they said, well, I spend a lot of time in front of my fridge and my television looking for new things in both. So I don't know, again, if anybody can relate. We did a lot of snacking and a lot of takeout and a lot of skip the dishes during that time. I always say I'm a terrible cook. So I found my job during the pandemic was to keep the restaurants in business. And I was very happy to do that. And we also know, and we're still seeing the effects, that anybody who used drugs and alcohol to cope before, we're definitely in that space during. So we see that too. And shopping, oh my gosh. People identified that shopping for things, even if they didn't need them, was part of their day, just to hear the UPS truck come back and up the driveway. The sound of the beeping of the truck became our new ice cream truck bell. It was like, oh, ice cream. During the pandemic, it was like, oh, I have a delivery. So then CMHA National also posed the same question to the folks that were at the bottom of the triangle who said they were doing okay. And they said, well, what are you doing to be able to feel this way during that time? And again, they were very honest. They had a lot of the same stuff. But what they noticed was there was some extra things that maybe the first group didn't have as much of. And there's a name for this, and it's called coping strategies. It's like, what do we do in the face of hardship or really tough times to kind of look after our mental health? So what was on there was things like getting outside. I live 2 kilometers from the Bruce Trail, and how wild to think it took a pandemic to remind me that. Like, oh yeah, I could be out going for a hike. We ask the kids, we say, hey, who has a gym in their house that wasn't there before? And about 3/4 of the kids put their hand up. They're like, oh yeah, our garage, our basement now has all sorts of gym equipment in it that wasn't there before. these Peloton bikes, you couldn't get them for 11 months during the pandemic because they were so back ordered. People took up hobbies that they hadn't done in a long time, or maybe new ones. We learned how to stay connected any way we could. My in-laws are in Woodstock. I don't know if anybody's down that way. And so I sent a lot of letters. Every Monday, I'd send a letter to my mother-in-law who lives in Cedarview, right across the road from the hospital. And I send her a letter with some pictures in it, just to keep her up to date on what was going on up our way. And so that made a big difference to so many people, having that stuff they could add into their day-to-day life. And I don't know if anybody kind of felt this way after the pandemic. Anybody ever seen the movie Forrest Gump? He goes for a walk and he just walks and walks and walks. He just keeps going because he had no other choice. He just kept going. And at one point he stopped and he looked back at all the folks behind him and he said, I'm tired. I'm going home now. And boy, didn't we feel that way after a certain length of time in the pandemic. And interestingly enough, if you're a trivia buff, the length of time it took Forrest Gump to get tired of walking was 3 years, 2 months, 10 days, and 14 hours. And we just hit that not that long ago. So that's we were like, oh my gosh, we can relate. So I look at my mental health like a thermostat. That's kind of how I look at it. My brain is my thermostat. It's my regulator. That's its job. And there are lots of things these days that can make me sad. Absolutely. And my brain's job is to allow me to feel that. And then what it does is it says, hey, let's see what we can do to get you back to center. And there are lots of things right now that can stress me out. Shrinkflation. Oh, doesn't that just get me energized in the grocery store? And again, my brain's job is to allow me to feel that, but then, okay, Tiger, get me back to my norm. And everybody's norm is different. Some of us are Tiggers. You're like, I'm 20 minutes into this conversation and I already know Jackie's a Tigger. You are very correct. And then some of us are Eeyores. We kind of just, we're just around on the outsides, right? When we're at the party, because we still come to the party, we might notice the hostess, needs the punch filled up. And we might sneak into the kitchen and do that for them. And then, when the party's, wrapping up, we might the hostess is busy. I'll just sneak out now, text Heather and let her know it was a great job, right? Each of us have a different norm. And the other job of our thermostat is when our norm changes, it's the job of the people around us to notice, hey, you're not like your normal self. Is everything okay? That's our thermostat. That's its job. That's why it's there. And Howie Mandel, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a Canadian, he's a comedian, and he lives with one of the highest forms of anxiety there is. And the pandemic was not his happy space at all. It was his worst nightmare, to be honest. And so he has really focused on his mental health. And he said, it's really interesting. As kids, as grown-ups, we go to the dentist once a year, twice a year, right, to get these things checked out. We don't go to get a cavity. We go to prevent them. And he said, it's been interesting how we haven't ever managed our mental health the same. Where's the mental health checkup every 6 months? Again, not to get a mental illness, but to prevent it, to see how we're doing. So I'm going to take you through Howie Mandel's mental health checkup. It's pretty slick. So first part of a mental health checkup, do you like who you are? That's the basis of everything. I love Garfield. He's the perfect example. He doesn't care one flying fig if someone were to come up to him and call him extra fluffy. He'd be like, yeah. What else is new? Did you bring lasagna? Because I love lasagna. And when we have that is our biggest protective factor you can ever have. We need to be comfortable in the skin we're in. All the pieces, all the bits, all the parts that stick out all over the place. That makes us who we are. And if we think about, again, a norm, it doesn't exist. A norm is just a setting on a washing machine. And to be honest, you probably only use it once every 5 loads because we all have delicates. Yes, we do. So that's my reminder. We're all different, and we're all different for a reason. That's what makes the world awesome. And then rule number 2 to good mental health, we all need people in our life that love us for exactly who we are. It is so important that we all have at least one person who recognizes when we're not ourselves and shows up at our door, wraps us in a blanket, puts us on the couch, makes us watch Dirty Dancing 8 times, feeding us cheesies until we tell them what is wrong. We all need that person. And even they come in different packages. Our person can be a cousin, a neighbor, a spouse, a sibling, a best friend that we've had since grade 4. But we all need at least one of those in our life. It's so important. And then their job is to make you talk about it. It's so important that we talk about, with the kids, we say, feelings are like Shrek. He says, they're kind of like farts, better out than in, right? Because the longer you keep a fart inside, let's be honest, the more uncomfortable it's going to get. And also, let's be honest, it's going to come out anyways. So you might as well just let it go. So we need to find people we can fart freely with. We all need at least one. And we've had them always. Again, I don't know if anybody can relate. When I was growing up, we had them on the other end of the phone that had a cord attached to the wall, and it was called Zero. And it was the operator. When you call and get a phone number, you're like, oh, hey, operator, because it was a real person. You got to chat with them. My Aunt June was an operator for Bell Canada, and she said, oh, Jackie, the stories I heard. She said every now and then you get a neighbor on the phone looking for a number and just telling you a story. And she said, I didn't dare tell them I'd already heard it from the neighbor before. So, but that was who we talked to, was the operator on the phone. And if you had the shared line where you have 2 or 3 people on the same line, sometimes you heard it without them knowing. And so I look at all the people we sometimes talk to. Hairdressers, they're great listeners. You're sitting still for 30 minutes. And boy, don't we share a lot of stuff to our hairdressers. They know all the stories too. So I look at my feelings. One of the best way to talk about my feelings in a day is with a box of Smarties. It's my favorite because every color represents a different feeling. If you've ever seen the movie Inside Out with your kids or your grandkids, right? Yellow is joy. What brings you joy? Purple, right? That's fear. What scares you? What makes you nervous, right? Green, what grosses you out, right? That was disgust, right? For me, it's broccoli. Still to this day, it's broccoli, right? And brown, well, brown's the poop emoji, just saying, right? And so you can have a great conversation with people just with a box of Smarties. For every Smartie, for every color, tell me a feeling that you may have had or experienced. And if joy and disgust aren't the only feelings you have, you can get out the feelings wheel, and that makes it easier to talk about it sometimes. I'm not sad, but I'm definitely feeling disappointed about my smaller containers of Pringles. Yes, I am. Yeah, so that's what the feelings wheel is for. And then the last rule to good mental health is, what are the things that make you smile even in the worst times? And we all need those things that still help us feel good despite what's going on. And I give this guy a lot of credit. So for the folks in Grey Bruce, you might know him. For those out of town, who knows, you might know him too. Because during the pandemic, he got tagged on a 25 push-ups in 25 days challenge. And he remembers saying to his friend, really? You tagged me, right? The guy who spends the least amount of time in a gym, and you tagged me. And but he took the challenge and he said, I'm going to do it my way. He says, I'm going to make a bunch of little funny videos. So he had a banana costume and all these things. And every day for 25 days, he made a little video to raise awareness about mental health during the pandemic. And these videos were such a hoot. They were getting shared all over the place. And about 6 days in, he called me and he said, Jackie, he said, I just got a message from Australia. He said, the person said, dude, you don't know me. We've never met. He said, but I have to say thank you. Because in Australia, some of their rules were even tighter than ours because it's an island. Whew, once you get something on an island, it's not coming back off. And he said, it felt like I haven't smiled in months. And I thought I'd forgotten how. He says, and then I saw your video with the banana costume. He says, I laughed so hard I peed my pants. And he says, I want to thank you for that. Right? Not the pee the pants part, but the fact that I laughed so hard. He said, it reminded me it's possible. And so I give him a lot of credit for that. He probably did just as much for the mental health of folks in Grey Bruce in that 3-week time than anything else combined. But we all need that, something that will make us laugh regardless of what's going on. And when we think about all the things that can get in the way of that, we sometimes blame it on adulting, right? We're like, oh, I couldn't wait to grow up, right? Because then I could watch whatever I want on television. I could eat whatever I want, whenever I wanted. Oh, it was so lovely. Oh, but they lied to us. Is this more like what adulting looks like? It's like unread emails, voicemails, all these things I have to do. Did I get my oil change, or am I actually 4,000 over? I can't remember when the last time. It's funny how adulting can be very different than we think it is when we're kids. And when we look at the things that can cause us stress, stress is actually a normal reaction to something. It's like your body's way of saying, "Ooh, ooh, I don't like that." And stress can be motivating. It's what keeps us on a budget. It's what reminds us to study before a test. But what we never want is when stress gets so overwhelming, we just can't even. We just can't even get out of bed. We just can't even brush our teeth, right? That's not what we want. So then it's about finding a balance. And that is one of the trickiest things to do. So I asked Google, I said, Google, can you find me a picture of an elephant on a ping pong ball? Because that's what balancing stressful situations feels like sometimes. And it didn't find a ping pong ball, but it found a beach ball. And I thought that was pretty close. So it's about finding that balance where we know there's going to be stressful things in our life. So what do we do on the other side to manage that? And when we look at our days, the days that maybe all the things that we got going on in a day, all the errands we got to run and appointments we got to get to and the driving we have to do. And when we look at the end of the day, there's a real difference between being tired, that was a productive day, I got a lot done, versus exhausted. At the end of the day, my bucket was empty. And there's a big difference there. And sometimes the difference in that bucket are just the tiny little things we do to just put some stuff back in that bucket. Did we have a healthy snack? Did we get out and go for a walk? Did we get some fresh air? Did we get our 8 hours of sleep the night before? All of those things, they seem small and minuscule, but wow, can they make the biggest difference in our day? And when we aren't getting those things, our body sometimes lets us know. So I don't know if you have a check engine light in your vehicle, but it is my worst nightmare because it tells me nothing. The check engine light comes on and I don't know. Do I pull over? Do I call CAA? Can I keep driving? Because it tells me nothing, but it's telling me something. And my mechanic told me once when I had to get a whole new transmission, he said, Jackie, how long has your check engine light been on? I said, well, a few months. He said, and you didn't come see me sooner. Well, I meant to. He's like, well, Jackie, that's why you're replacing the transmission and not the 2 liters of oil that goes in it. And I'm like, fair enough. Well, mental health is exactly the same. We have check engine lights that are there for a reason to let us know, hey, something's up. And maybe I should take this to my mental health mechanic and get it checked out. There's different signs that maybe my mental health isn't doing so good. When am I most likely to injure myself? When I'm tired. That's when I'm most likely to trip over my own 2 feet that I've had for 52 years, and I can still trip over them. When I'm tired, then I'm injured. Then I maybe, am hobbling along. We look at sometimes how my relationships get affected when my mental health isn't doing so good. We sometimes become Jekyll and Hydes. We sometimes are the good doctor out and about and the not so good doctor at home when we're not feeling ourselves. And it's amazing how our mental health can also affect our physical health. We think of aches and pains and maybe not feeling so hungry and all of those pieces because the two go together. You can't separate them. They're one part and parcel. So I look at all the ways our body sends us check engine lights. So we look at this list and we're like, can we relate to any of them? And if we can, if they're in our lives, all it is a sign that, hey, maybe I should take this to a mental health mechanic and see what's going on. It could be anything. These check engine lights could be anything from menopause, oh yeah, to a food allergy, anything. But it's worth recognizing that they're going off and then taking them to somebody who can help us do the diagnostic. Just like the mechanic does it with our car to figure out what the check engine light is all about. So the other part of a check engine light isn't always the things we see on the outside. Sometimes the check engine light are the things we hear in a person's conversation. So we're looking for things like the comments they might make about things. We look at things like black and white thinking, all or nothing. If I don't get 96% on my math test, I'm a failure. Right? We've heard that every now and then. We've maybe even said that every now and then about things that we're doing. Converting positives into negatives. That's something you can hear in a person's language. Maybe Heather brings coffees into the office to say thank you. And maybe the person at Tim Hortons put little smiley faces on those coffees. And Samantha and Steve are saying, oh, isn't that so nice they did that? And here's Jackie telling Heather, they do it for everybody. What did I do? I turned a positive into a negative. So this is also what we consider check engine lights, are things we listen for in each other's conversation. And they are just things to pick out and turn and say, hey, I noticed you said this. It makes me wonder if everything's okay. Hey, I noticed these things happen and I just wondered if everything's okay. And again, could be everything, anything, but at least it's worth asking always. So, Jackie, where do I take one of these mental health checkups? Well, there's two spaces you can do that. The Mood Disorders Society of Ontario, Association of Ontario, has something they call a checkup from the neck up. Oh yeah, isn't that clever? It's been around for years. So if you go to the Mood Disorders website, you can find that little checkup. And it's just about 10 questions, just asks you how you're feeling, how's your sleeping, how are your relationships doing? Do you still have things that make you smile? Do you still have things that make you feel good? They're just regular questions, and they get you to do it on a scale of 1 to 5, right? How you feeling? And then afterwards, it gives you a number. And this is not the exam you want to get perfect on, right? But if you do, it'll say, hey, you can print off this piece of paper and maybe take it to your doctor. It's a good way of showing them, hey, these are the check engine lights that are going off. And then during the pandemic, the government created this one, wellnesstogether.ca. And this one comes in colors. So you answer some questions about how I'm coping, how am I sleeping, because sleep is everything, and then how am I feeling? And it gives you color, green, yellow, red. Green, you're doing awesome. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it because it's working. Yellow, you're doing great. But maybe just add a couple little buckets, little drops in that bucket. And then red, hey, maybe this is a time to get a hold of one of those services in the community. And then the great thing about this one is it's a dental checkup, and it reminds you in a couple of weeks to try it again. Are things getting better? Is there an improvement, or is it getting worse? And if so, this is definitely the time to reach out. So that's why I love that one, because it's a true checkup and it makes you do it again. So self-care. These are the things we can do ourselves. I look at this as this is like brushing my teeth. I brush my teeth every day, right? And I do it to prevent cavities. Well, self-care needs to be the new brushing our teeth, but for this thing. And I've got a pretty short self-care list. There's only 3 things. I just need $1 million, a room full of puppies, and a hug from my grandma. And I am good, right? But I can't get those every single day of the week. So I might need an extra couple of things on that list. So it's all about finding what works for you. It's connecting with people that make you feel good, that make you feel heard, that make you feel loved, right? Whether it's your hairdresser or your grandma, right? Finding people you can talk to. And then that sense of purpose. What do I have to offer today, right? And is that helping out with something? Is that reaching out to somebody and see how they're doing? We have, there's, again, me singing during the pandemic, and I tell people over and over again, I didn't do it for them. I did it for me. It was for my mental health, to feel like, hey, I can give something back. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. But boy, did I feel like I needed to contribute something. So karaoke it was. And then taking a break. When do we turn our brain off? Do we allow ourselves that full 8 hours to just rest and relax and not think about all those things that are stressing us out? It's so important. And again, there's many different ways to do that. And then, yes, I'm so glad you're doing a tax clinic next week, because dealing with your stress means dealing with the stress. Yeah, I know I'm going to have to do my taxes this year, and wait until July is probably not going to be helpful for my stress. And then let's say I do all those things and I'm still in the red. Well, where are those places I can reach out for help? Start with our doctor. Sometimes it's the easiest diagnosis. Nothing like a urinary tract infection to affect my mental health, but it's one of the easiest physical illnesses to treat. So it could be something so easy as, I just need some more vitamin D in my life, right? And then all the offices of CMHA. This is our map. This is where you're going to find the offices in Grey Bruce, but there is actually 330 of them across Canada. So if you go to cmha.ca, you can find the mental health office in your area. And this is all the stuff they're probably going to have under that roof: housing, family support, peer support, recovery college, counseling, case management. There's so many things available under that CMHA umbrella. There's talk lines. We have here in Grey Bruce, we have our mental health talk line of Grey Bruce. That's where you can find somebody to talk to on the phone. Then there's a new one. I don't know if you've heard about it, all across Canada now, called 988. I would call 911 if my house is on fire, and I call 988 if I'm not feeling so good up here. So I love that there's now a 3-digit number all across Canada just to help me. And then, because we're talking to some people from some pretty small towns, here's our new agricultural wellness initiative. This is like benefits, mental health benefits for farmers that never had them ever, forever. And now we have a really huge mental health support for farmers. There's a lot of stuff in there. There's a talk line that's available for the farmers, their family members, and all their employees. It's like an EAP. Which you would sometimes have at work, and you're like, I heard about it, but I never called it. Well, call your EAP if you have it. Find out what they can help you with, because you probably would be very surprised to hear some of the things under that umbrella. I didn't know they could help me with some diet changes, or quitting smoking, or help me do my taxes. Yes, they could. They have all that stuff under that EAP umbrella. And then my favorite one is called Bounce Back. It came about just before the pandemic. And these are little workbooks that you can order to your house. And if you're not a workbook person, then all the activities are actually available on video. So they can become like your new podcast, your new TV show. You watch Yellowstone, and then you watch a Bounce Back video. That would make me very happy if you did that. So these are all the different topics you can get in Bounce Back. And they're just regular, everyday stuff, right? Understanding why I worry so much, and why does it affect my physical health so much? Unhelpful thinking, right? Those comments we can hear in each other's conversation. Avoidance. Boy, am I a procrastinator of the 10th degree, right? All these different little workbooks you can get. And then there's different ages. There's youth ones, adult ones, and my favorite is the short books. activities that are 5 minutes or less for those of us who don't sit still very well. And all of them are free. You just go to Bounce Back, or you can call the phone number and they'll get you connected. And if you get the workbooks, they also connect you with a coach like Heather and Samantha and Steve. And they just call and say, hey, did you get the books? Did you like them? Want to try another one? And that's Bounce Back. And for everything else, there it is, my favorite number in the whole world, 211. It's like the best kept secret in the universe. And it can connect you to so much stuff. Hey, I don't know where the closest PSSO program is in my area. Call 211. They'll connect you with a Heather and a Samantha and a Steven. Where's grief supports? Where are these income tax clinics she talks about? What about veteran supports, transportation? You can find it out on 211. It's my favorite. You get a real live person and it doesn't cost you a dime. Unlike 411, which is a computer and it costs you $1.50. So the last part here is when in those moments when every light on my dashboard is going on, the oil light, the brake light, the check engine light, it is blaring. Well, I might need to call in some help. So it's funny again how we have this misconception about 911. We call 911 when we physically are hurt, but we can also call it if we're worried about someone's mental health. If they're in mental health distress, you can call 911 and say, hey, I have a friend in mental health crisis. And they will send somebody to check it out. They send a police officer with a social worker. The social worker comes and asks those same questions that you would find on those two websites to determine if, hey, do you need to go see a mental health mechanic? Or do we need to take you to the hospital? And they can make either one of those happen. There's some really great people out there. So out of all of those things, Jackie, those were some pretty wild statistics you shared. You got any good news? Well, yes, I do. I had a co-op student during the pandemic. She says, Jackie, there's so many great things going on out there for our seniors and our healthcare workers. She said, but sometimes when people live with mental illness, they're in not so great housing places. How do I help them? And so she came up with this program called the Good Deeds Project. And she asked students, she said, you're sitting at home anyways, write me a letter. Write me a letter that you would send to someone who is really struggling with their mental health. And then we delivered those letters. So these were some of them. Hey, I hope you're doing well. The sun is bright, and so are you. Always think positive. You will see your family soon. Never give up on who you are. Be strong. Always be strong. Mistakes are just proof that you are trying. Just be you. That's the best part of who you are. It's been hard, but don't give up. You are amazing, no matter what. Don't give in on what negative things people might say, and be happy, no matter what. I hope you have a good year. Signed, your friend. And this was the artwork that came with it. And we delivered those letters out and about, and they made the biggest difference in so many people's day. And so if you don't know it already, the world is a better place with Mary Lou and John and Paul and Robert and Elaine and Pat and Marcel and Tom and Dennis and Dolores and Samantha and Heather and Stephen. It is, because it's all of these people together that makes our world so great. So I hope this made you smile. I hope it made you think. I hope it brought up some questions, because I'm pretty sure. How did I do, Heather? Did I leave us enough time for Q&A? I've been keeping my eye on that clock, making sure I kept on time, because I'm not known for that.
Absolutely. I'm gonna end the recording here.